TV, fashion, toys, the 90s are back. But the mysteries of 2 decades ago are serving a deeper psychological purpose, especially in 2018.
Heaven's Gate mass suicide left the world both horrified and fascinated by what happened inside a Rancho Santa Fe home.
Why a cult's massive suicide still fascinates America today.
There's been a violent attack on an American athlete.
Nancy Kerrigan was attacked as she left the ice.
Attacked by an unknown assailant.
Why someone would do this? What are they after? I was scared.
For your own safety?
Yes.
And Tanya's journey from villain to victim.
I told him, OJ, you're breaking the laws of God. One day, everybody's gonna know everything that you've done, man.
Plus, who could forget OJ's fall from grace? Tonight on The Why, how infamous scandals from the 90s still capture our attention today.
Good evening. I'm Chance Seals with The Why. We tend to be persistently, sometimes defiantly, hopeful about the future. Keeps us going, even in difficult times. And sometimes you hear, though, people say our best days are behind us. They could be talking about work or as a nation or as a species. There's always this pull to our past. For instance, a few years ago, you probably saw this too. I noticed a ton of old toys that I knew well, because we used to play with them, showing up in stores again, like strawberry shortcake. Remember her? We loved her. They were my sister's dolls, but I loved them too. They were everywhere. They were everything in the 80s, these toys. One of the best parts is that they all smelled differently. You open the box of whichever one you got. Strawberry smelled like strawberries and kind of baby powder. And then she had lemon meringue, her friend, and plum pudding. They were great. They were cute and they smelled good. And really nothing connects you to the past instantaneously like smell. It's just right there. It is all about nostalgia when it comes to that. Now, more recently, we've been tapping into another era, the 1990s. I saw a commercial that took me right back to Lanford, Illinois. In the Connors living room with that Afghan that they always had over their couch. This is coming back to ABC.
Yes! Woo! What happened?
He made a three-point shot.
How many points does he get?
3.
Why'd they stop?
Foul.
What's a foul?
Women.
Darlene and Dan, and that laugh, you know, she always had that laugh. That meant it was either that night of the week or it was time for bed, because it was that and then MASH. You go right back. Throughout the 90s, we loved that show where I was from in Missouri. Roseanne Connor was brash and funny and loving, and she was off color. Her show is a throwback to that, politically incorrect humor being okay during that time and space. But things like Strawberry Shortcake and Roseanne, they're pretty fluffy forms of nostalgia. Tonight on The Why, we're taking a different angle. 90s nostalgia is being mixed with sleuthing now, finding the answers to some of our biggest national scandals and mysteries that plagued us for months, sometimes years. Here's a few.
The haters always say, Tanya, tell the truth. There's no such thing as truth. Everyone has their own truth.
So what I'm trying to get a sense of is this rush to judgment and how in a few short hours, these detectives closed up shop on a complex investigation that could have gone any different direction.
Were there any problems between you and your parents?
This is what a little sissy does.
Lyle bought a new Porsche, Eric a Jeep.
I'll take the gold and the diamonds on the dial.
You told me everything. How you shot your parents. Everybody thinks we were this perfect family. But we were a disaster.
He's on the move.
His phone's talking to us and he doesn't even know it.
That room is full of people that love me.
Then that room is full of people who don't know you.
David. They're coming for me.
Whoa, whoa, whoa! Calm down! Please,
Get your hands in the air and get on the ground!
There are women and children in here!
It's entertainment, but brings back so many memories. Sometimes you remember where you were when you watched that stuff. So tonight on The Why are we seeing this trend right now of mysteries from our past, these giant stories laid bare and combed through piece by piece. Those were Tonya Harding, O.J. Simpson, the Menendez brothers, the murder trial, the killing of Versace, and then also Waco, Texas, all on TV or in the movie theaters in the past few months or right now. Experts say all of this serves a deep psychological purpose that goes way beyond enjoyment. And they say there's a reason it's happening right now in 2018. We'll speak with that expert in a few minutes. But first, I wanted to dive into one example, go granular here with Heaven's Gate. Some of you may remember it, some may not. I recently listened to a 10-part, 10-hour podcast about this mass suicide because you might remember this story hit the news cycle like a Mack truck. The front page of the San Francisco Chronicle, March 1997, had this, and it was nearly every city had this type of thing. Cult suicide feared. 39 died near San Diego. At first, all the people inside were mistaken for men, but there were men and women. They had done this because they had all cut their hair. No one knew why. Instantly, there was wall-to-wall coverage of this compound in California with this lush green backyard and full of dead bodies. Who were they? Why did they do this? Did they have a choice to do this? Almost right away, the group's leader, Marshall Applewhite, he became a fixture on every show, every magazine. For instance, Newsweek, it ran this cover. It said, "Follow me," showing the man with bulging eyes and silver hair that led this group. He had convinced dozens of people to follow him into death. How'd he do it? So soon we started seeing videos running everywhere that they had been collected over the years. This is from a group called Heaven's Gate Database.
I'm here to offer you, as these are, an opportunity to know the truth so that if you can connect with it at any level, then you might survive the respading or the recycling that is about to occur.
Okay, it sounds bizarre, obviously, but it resonated with America and around the world. You felt for many of these people and you were intrigued by this. So let's sort through some of these pieces before we bring it back to today and why it's being re-examined. We were looking at Applewhite, group members, theology, methodology. What was happening here? At the time, frankly, we didn't know. But 2 decades later, it's coming into focus.
Scandals and mysteries from the 90s are enjoying a renaissance of sorts. The Versace murder, the siege at Ruby Ridge, the Menendez murders, all being re-examined. Psychologists say it helps us tap into days gone by and reordering national mysteries. Probably none was quite so stupefying as Heaven's Gate. Here's what happened on March 26th, 1997. Police entered a mansion in suburban San Diego, California, and they found 39 bodies, 21 women, 18 men, all members of the Heaven's Gate cult. They wore black Nikes and tracksuits. They were covered in purple shrouds. We found out they died from eating applesauce laced with phenobarbital and hydrocodone, washing it down with vodka, and then putting plastic bags over their heads. Coroner's report showed they did not all die at once. It took place in 3 waves over several days. Perhaps the most well-known, cult leader Marshall Applewhite was among the dead as well. Why did they do it? In film statements, members made it clear they did not believe they were killing themselves. They saw it as an exit from their human vehicles, as they called it, allowing them to ascend to the next level aboard a spaceship that was carrying God and hiding behind the tail of the Hale-Bopp comet, which was passing near Earth in 1997. Heaven's Gate actually began, though, 2 decades earlier and was not advertised as a doomsday group.
I am fortunate enough to have been in the class for 21 years.
Applewhite, who grew up as a Presbyterian, started the group in the 1970s along with a Baptist nurse and astrologer named Bonnie Lou Nettles. Through the years, they went by Guinea and Pig, Bo and Peep, and finally settled on T and O. They also were sometimes called the Two, which was a reference to Revelation 11:3. And I will appoint my 2 witnesses, and they will prophesy for 1,260 days, clothed in sackcloth. Their doctrine, when you get down into it, was a little hard to follow, but Gizmodo provides a succinct description here. The earth was about to be wiped out, and those who wanted to survive needed to reach the level above human. That's where escaping the human vessel and heading to the spaceship came in. The group had a no sex, no human-level relationships, no socializing rule, according to Rolling Stone. Some members met the standard with castration. The end goal of all this was always to reach the next level. Members used the internet to preach their beliefs, and the group made money by designing web pages. The homepage still exists today. One member's parting message from March 18, 1997 reads, "My more intimate reasons for wanting to leave at this time come not from any sense of hopelessness or despair, as one might suspect. Quite the contrary. It is a profoundly joyous time for me, the fulfillment of everything I have always hoped for, to dwell in the Creator's house and be called by Him a son." 1 week later, 39 members were dead, families across the country were grieving, and a nation was perplexed at how this could happen in a mansion in the middle of San Diego.
In 1997, we didn't have many answers, but in 2018, we do. In the deconstructions of these past scandals and mysteries, there is a recurring theme here. The snapshots of these stories that we had in mind maybe for 2 decades are not quite the whole truth. For instance, on SNL at the time, Will Ferrell, he played Applewhite with the buzzed head, the white hair, and then he pretended to talk to Ted Koppel from Nightline from the Comet. He was sitting on the Comet. It was funny at the time. Most of our collective memory was kind of based on something like that, just a bunch of disturbed people following this crazy man off a cliff. They must have been coerced. But the individuals involved are actually incredibly complex. And in the retelling of their own story, you find the humanity. You hear their voices and begin to put the puzzle in order. You put the puzzle together. For instance, in one exit interview, it's from a woman named Prisodi, and they all added Odie to the end of a name because it meant something like you are in the image of God. This is what she shared in her message.
It is my choice to lay down my borrowed physical body, to prove to the next level my love and the trust I have in my older members for what they have shown me as their example of what I can become. My thoughts in these last hours are only of joy and wonder at the thought of going home to my older members and being in T's house at last.
The podcast I told you about, which has been a big hit online, it's called Heaven's Gate. It's hosted by a man named Glenn Washington. And by the way, one of our production companies on that is involved. It's called Stitcher, a sister company of Newsy. In the 10-hour investigation of this national touchstone, many news stones are turned over, especially on the personal side of the lives lost. Here's one moment. It's narrated by Glenn.
Also in March, the group takes day trips and videotapes them. You can see how fond the away team really is of the planet they're about to leave. They go to the Wild Animal Park in San Diego, and they ooh and ah along with the crowd at the bird show. And the group heads to the seaside to feed the sea lions.
Hey, you guys, come on, come on. It's time to consume.
And you can hear how patient and sweet they are with each other.
What if you wave your arms up and down real wildly? I think that'll get them coming down the hill. Come on, come on.
We're trying to feed you guys.
Come on.
That hit me when I heard it, because you hear how gentle they are with each other, and then it's so discordant with all the images that we remember with the shrouds and the Nikes. I wanted to learn more. I talked with Glenn Washington about his interest in tackling such an enormous, complex story that transfixed an entire nation. He actually had somewhat of a personal connection, and his intuition told him telling a story from 1997 tells us a lot about 2018.
Glenn, 20 years later, what got you interested in Heaven's Gate again?
It's just one of those things where I felt like, given my own background, and I'm remembering where I was when this cult exploded into public consciousness, I knew that I had a special connection to it because I had grown up in a cult of my own, or should I say, a cult of several 100,000 people, and I just couldn't help but think, what if? And that's what drew me back.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about that. You grew up in a religious sect that was strict. It was actually kind of racist if you listen to the podcast, some of the policies that were there, yet many people stayed.
Yeah, I don't have a really good explanation for why we stayed in the organization as long as we did. I left in my late teens. I was a true believer. I mean, it's like any other cult, I think, and a lot of it's built on fear. And the fear was around, the end of days. The apocalypse is nigh. If you don't get yourself together right this moment, I'm not talking next year. I'm talking right here today.
I wonder specifically, Heaven's Gate, when you decided I'm going to tackle this, how did you go about that? Because these were 39 different lives and even more if you look at the people who survived, and to actually make sure you were fair and you were accurate.
We wanted to talk to as many different perspectives as we could and hope that a truth would emerge from that. And I think it's very interesting you say, why are we going back to the 90s right now to try and look back at things then? I think really it's trying to understand what's happening now. What are the seeds that were laid then that affect what's going on now? From religion to philosophy, what was the foment then that I think that in a lot of ways we're seeing now?
It seemed like you were super intentional in your reporting here to not go the route of Will Ferrell on SNL, doing a send-up. It was very much, it was non-judgmental that, yes, maybe this was a cult, but you also let the humans and their personal stories speak for themselves.
These are real people with real lives and real aspirations, and meeting them kind of through this haze of history it just reminded me of how what a varied thing humanity is. But at the end of the day, we wanted the same things. They wanted this community. They wanted love. They wanted all the things that you and I want. They wanted all that stuff. They wanted at the end to put everything they believed on the line to get it. It was really tough, but really, I think in a lot of ways, potentially hopeful, meeting them and seeing, these people at their best with a smile in their heart as they went to the end.
That's just a snapshot of one group and one story, but this is a much larger trend at this point. We have mentioned the role of nostalgia with these stories coming back. The rise of 90s mysteries is sort of two-pronged, touches on emotion, plus a sense of meaning and mastery of our past. A research paper got my attention. It's called Nostalgia, a Psychological Perspective. One tiny piece of it is this. They were testing nostalgic responses, and it says this, quote, gender differences were not significant, but significant differences across age groups were obtained for most items. The intensity of nostalgic sentiment varied across objects, situations, aspects of society, and people. So what does this all mean? I spoke with Professor Christine Batcho. She's at Le Moyne College in Syracuse, New York. She's a professor of psychology. She wrote that paper. She's an expert on nostalgia. So I asked her, what is driving this surge of 90s reexaminations now?
What sort of emotional benefits, or something that might be detrimental, accrue with exposure to nostalgic items?
Nostalgic items really help us explore better who we truly are, who we really want to be. So much in our society right now can separate us from who we believe to be our true self, our authentic, intrinsic self. So nostalgia helps there, but even more importantly, it helps keep us connected in our relationships to other people. It's a very pro-social emotional phenomenon.
Do you think combining nostalgia with also orderliness with our past can give us some benefit also?
One thing is this, the puzzles of the past are safer to tackle because we have distance from them now. So in a way, we can take ourselves out of the current puzzles that we have, the unresolved conflicts, and it's a little safer to talk about something that happened a long time ago. The other thing is, nostalgia fits into this partly because we're remembering the support systems that we had, the people who followed those scandals or mysteries or unsolved crimes with us.
With people who otherwise we might have some conflict with about things like politics. Instead, this could bring people together in some odd way.
It gives us hope because we realize when we think back nostalgically to those older controversies, well, we've lived through those and we remained family members, we remained friends. And if we can do that again now with our current problems, that gives us hope that there's light at the end of the tunnel.
During times of uncertainty especially, we've seen nostalgia rise over time. And it kind of goes into what you were talking about, whether it's evolution or just cohesiveness. Do you think we are in such a time right now?
There's this constant tension that we feel between wanting stability versus wanting change. And we especially in our nation, we love change because it brings us technological progress. On the other hand, there's certain kinds of instability that are very stressful. Change itself is stressful. In addition to that, we found a correlation between nostalgia and planning for the future. It gives people this motivation to say, when I put my family together, or when I become a leader, or when I become an executive, I'm going to do it better.
Is it always going to be that no matter what time you pick and choose, that we're going to be looking back and always see it rosier than maybe it really was?
Negative emotions fade more quickly over time than positive do. So, for instance, if you think about a woman who's given birth, the pain and the negative anxiety and stress, etc., it's not long before she forgets all that, and she just remembers the joy of holding that newborn in her arms. Will it always be rosier? Absolutely not. I interviewed people a number of years ago when I first started researching nostalgia, and I found that the greatest generation had many people who had grown up during the Great Depression. They were not at all nostalgic for those periods. They remembered being hungry and they remembered poverty. They did not think that period was rosy. In fact, it motivated them to try to create a better world, economically speaking, at least for their children.
Everyone I spoke with for this story tonight believe this trend, collectively re-examining some 90s mysteries that, were with us for so long, it could have a positive effect. Said it brings to light to black boxes of that time and reminds us that 2018 will eventually be 2 decades ago, bringing a little perspective to the here and now. Let's get to your evening headlines on Newsy. President Trump says he is considering pulling Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE agents, out of California. He blasted the so-called sanctuary state, saying it has done a, quote, lousy management job in regard to illegal immigration and dismantling the MS-13 gang. The state recently implemented a new law that prevents all local law enforcement from helping federal immigration authorities.
The protection of these horrible criminals in California and other places, but in California, that if we ever pulled our ICE out, if we ever said, hey, let California alone, let them figure it out for themselves, in 2 months they'd be begging for us to come back. They would be begging. And you know what? I'm thinking about doing it.
The president made that comment while meeting with state and local officials about gun violence following last week's shooting at a Florida high school. For months, we've seen reports of tensions between President Trump and his national security advisor, H.R. McMaster. That's his second national security advisor. Now, McMaster could soon be out of the White House.
National Security Advisor Lieutenant General H.R. McMaster could be leaving the White House. CNN reports the Pentagon is conducting a search for a military position for McMaster in the Defense Department or the Army. Officials are reportedly looking for a job that would allow the 3-star general to receive his 4th star. CNN says things have been tense between President Donald Trump and McMaster for months. Trump criticized McMaster on Twitter Saturday after the National Security Advisor said there was incontrovertible evidence that Russia meddled in the 2016 presidential election. McMaster joined the White House last year after Trump's previous national security advisor, Michael Flynn, resigned over his contacts with the Russian ambassador. In January, McMaster shut down rumors he was leaving his post, saying it's a tremendous honor to do this job every day.
Special counsel Robert Mueller has filed new charges against former Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort and his business associate Rick Gates. The new indictment returned by a grand jury today includes 32 new charges. They include bank fraud, filing false individual income tax returns, and failing to report foreign bank accounts. It says the two fraudulently got more than $20 million in loans. The two were previously indicted on charges including conspiracy to launder money and failing to register as a foreign agent. This is The Why.